Welcome to the Igniting the CEO Within podcast, where we interview successful high-level professionals to discover lessons they've learned throughout their career that can help ignite that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge, and I'll be your host for the next 15 minutes or so. Our show is sponsored by Quaid, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Quaid has developed Launchpad, which offers an opportunity for experienced executive coaches and strategic advisors to become licensed circle directors. After completing the Launchpad program, you'll lead your own peer advisory circles, helping other CEOs and entrepreneurs excel in their professional and personal lives while providing a community of accountability, challenge, and support. If you'd like to learn more, go to quaidcircle.com. On the show today, I'm really excited to have Sharon Wingron. She's the CEO and founder of DevelopPEOPLE. She's out of St. Louis, Missouri. Sharon, welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Well, thanks, Mark. I'm really delighted to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Very cool. All right, we've got a short amount of time, so I'm just going to jump into it. All right,
So
and you've had an amazing career. I've watched and looked at a lot of your background, especially with DISC and all this. You have been exposed to a ton of leaders in your life and your career. If you had to start to pare it down to one or two traits that separate the really great leaders from the let's just say not so great leaders, what would those be?
that's a great question, Mark. So one of the first things I'm going to say, since you mentioned DISC, is it is not a specific DISC style, because people often think that great leaders are supposed to be D or dominant style, and that is not true. So let's just
Yep.
get that out of the way. So what I think is relevant to great leaders, one of the key traits is that they don't focus on themselves. They focus on their people. They focus on building a team that can then serve their clients or customers, constituents as needed. So really that's key, is they're focusing on their team, not on themselves. And
Mhm.
I'd say a second trait that's super important is that they're continuously learning and improving. They know that they don't have all the answers, that they're never going to have all the answers. So they're just constantly on that quest to learn more and to keep getting a little better all the time.
I love both of those. I want to unpack both of them just for a minute. The first one of really not focusing on themselves. To do that first, though, they have to be self aware first, right? To really
Absolutely.
understand who they are and what their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. So, I mean, first make sure you agree with that, but then how do you help individuals identify, their self awareness and know who they are and who they aren't?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, Mark. You have to be self-aware. I often joke awareness is the first step, right? So we need to leaders need to be aware of who they are, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, what their trigger points are, all of those types of things. And so, how I help people do that, how my team helps do that, is we do use DISC assessment. We use other assessment tools like PXT Select is another tool we work with. We use 360-degree assessments like Checkpoint 360. And, I've always found that you have to have coaching as a part of leadership development. So just sending someone off to a seminar as a co or as a for leadership development doesn't work. You really need coaching with them. So that coaching is a crucial part of helping people become self-aware also. And truly with the assessments too, no matter what tool you use, there needs to be some debrief and some coaching of that to help the person glean the most out of the report.
Yeah, walk through that. So I've been exposed to all of them. It seems like, and new ones come up all the time. But I guess let me ask one quick question. How often are people surprised when their assessment results come back?
In my experience, not very often,
Mhm.
honestly. Most people, it's more like it's validating what they know to be true about themselves already.
Yeah, yeah. I laugh at that. I took an assessment one time and was reading the results back to my wife, who the results basically said I don't make for a good employee because I challenge and ask questions and all. And so I read that out loud, and she goes, "Yeah, no shit." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I get it."
And I love that you mentioned that, Mark, because what I was thinking after I answered that was that what happens if people are surprised by the results, what I always advise them to do is share their results with a spouse, a partner, a close friend, whether it's somebody at work or somebody in their personal life, somebody that really knows them well and interacts with them frequently, and get that feedback from that person. Is this true? Because
Mhm.
sometimes we do have blind spots, or sometimes certain behaviors arise in certain situations or environments. So when we're getting that feedback from someone else, say, okay, have you seen this behavior? What does that look like? When does it come up? So coming at it from that point of curiosity is
Mhm.
going to help the people validate, is the report true for them? Or since most of the assessments are what you put in is what you get out, they're self-assessments typically, then the question becomes, all right, what were you thinking about when you responded? Were you being true to yourself,
Mhm.
true to your own, to what you really know to be true about yourself, or were you trying to game the system or respond in a way that you think that the assessment wanted, or whoever's asking you to take the assessment wanted? So there's going to be some inquiry around that if they are surprised by the results.
So let's say the assessment results come back and there is a deficiency between where that person is today and where they want to be as a leader. What are your next steps, and what next steps do you and your team take to help them start to gravitate towards that area where they're able to focus on others and utilize the talents that they do have?
Great question, Mark. So, first, depending on the assessment, it may not come back with deficiencies per se. It's a matter of coming back
Yeah.
with, this is where you are right now, or what we believe to be true from you based on how you responded to the assessment. So then, excuse me, we can go to, all right, so given what the assessment's saying about your current personality or behavior or leadership approach, depending on what it's being assessed, where do you want to be then? What do you aspire to? And so
Mhm.
we'll identify what those gaps are, those growth opportunities, and then work with that person to start to look at, okay, how can you close those gaps then? And that's where, some type of development program and coaching is going to work very well for that. Like, one tool we use is called Everything Disc Agile EQ, and that's really for developing emotional intelligence. One thing I really love about that tool is that it actually has suggested development steps built in with what they call an effort meter built in that says this is going to be easier or harder for you. So when we're working with someone to close their gaps, whether using that tool or another one, we're going to think about, where do they want to go? What do they want to become? What's that aspiration? Then we're going to help them think about what are some potential ways to develop that behavior, if you will, and then, kind of rate it like what's going to be, how much effort, how much energy is it going to take from you? What are you
Mhm.
willing to commit to? So then we're going to build out that plan. And that's where, again, ongoing coaching, where we're going to come back to them. How's it going? What's working well for you? What are you struggling with? What do we need to adapt? We're going to keep having that. And if they, once they nail that one behavior, then we can grow into the next one. But it's not like, I don't like it when people try to come up with this development plan where it's like, oh, I'm going to do these 10 things and I'm going to start doing them every day and I'm going to be fabulous from here on
Right.
out. That's not realistic. So let's be realistic about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I like that, and I like your phrase of energy too, and that almost goes back to the very first thing that you started is there's no right disc profile for a leader. What DISC and other and correct me when I go off the rails, but what DISC and other assessments really talk about is not whether you can do the job, it's how much energy you have to expend in certain areas, right? For me, I was a pretty high C and a pretty low I, but I was a bank president, and I had to go to rubber chicken dinners, right, where you have to, shake hands and talk to a bunch of people and all that kind of stuff, and I could do it, but I was exhausted afterwards, right?
Right.
And so I think you use that word energy, and I like that because it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we know, again, there's a really wide range of assessment tools out there, and people often get them confused. Depending on the tool, it may be measuring actual aspects of personality, which you're born with, and then they develop into your typical behaviors, your behavioral tendencies, your behavioral patterns, and everything. So people often confuse personality behavior. So you need to kind of pull those apart. But most of the tools, especially at leadership development, we're not looking at skills. And so that's another thing. Behaviors and skills are different things. things. What's inherent and natural is different than what you can learn, adaptive behavior or learned behavior. So to your point, we are wired in certain ways where certain things are going to be more joyful to us. They're going to energize us. Other things are going to drain our energy. But that doesn't mean we can't learn these other behaviors or skills. And that's part of what we explore with leaders, with people taking assessments is how can you leverage off your strengths, build on those, amplify those while buoying up the challenge areas that you have, putting systems and processes in place, things like that, to keep your energy from getting drained or to help you get in and get out when you need to do those things.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, which I think is one of the key successful traits or traits of a successful leader. And you also talked about that it can be trained or coached or developed. How does that? Because it seems almost that you're born with it, some, at least some level of emotional intelligence within you, but you're saying you can develop it and grow it and train it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, if we use the simple emotional intelligence model that like Daniel Goleman popularized, other people's research had come first, but Daniel Goleman popularized it. At the simplest level, we think in terms of self-awareness, self-management, interpersonal awareness, and relationship management. So just looking at those, different people are going to be born with different degrees of that. So
Hmm.
somebody, for instance, you mentioned the C style before, the conscientiousness style. Typically they're very internally reflective, so they may have a very degree of how high self-awareness. They're not as much people, right? So they may struggle more in the interpersonal awareness because they're more tuned inwardly, whereas somebody on the flip side, like with an influence style or high I style, for example, is very people focused. So they might be really incredibly interpersonally aware and be good at relation management, but they may struggle with their own self awareness, or managing themselves can be really challenging. So we're all going to start with some varying degrees of it. But then how we develop it, again, what we said earlier, awareness is the first step. So let's first measure, see where we are. And again, one thing that's important to know about emotional intelligence, it's not a personality assessment, it's a point in time measure, right? So
Hmm.
where are you right now versus what's your overall, this is the way you're forever going to be, right?
Right.
And very few assessments are measuring how you're going to forever be. You may have ongoing challenges, but that doesn't mean you're always going to be that way. So anyway, get that point in time, get a date baseline of data. And then, like we were talking about earlier, figure out, okay, how is this helping you right now? How is this hurting you? How is this impacting your success? Where do you need to grow? Some people are coming into coaching or being assessed, and wanting to develop their emotional intelligence because they're hitting specific pain points in life. Others are doing it because they're just wanting to grow, they're wanting to get better, right? So depending on what any person's unique situation is, then we can start to figure out, okay, what are the steps to take to help you develop that aspect of emotional intelligence. And again, the more you can really narrow it down to what's the specific thing you want to work on. Like, I don't want to just work on interpersonal awareness, that's too big, right? What I want to work on, for example, is I want to work on tuning into people's body language. So what does that mean? So how do we do that? Well, let's get clear about what do we mean when we say body language, and then what
Hmm.
are the aspects that we want to look at, and then what are meaningful and reasonable and actionable ways that we can start to do that. So for instance, really focusing, making eye contact with the person, noticing if they start to smile or not, or if their eyes start to get more, their eyebrows knit. So little things like that. So you start out more macro and you get more micro when you want to develop someone for long-term effectiveness.
Yeah, I love that. I feel seen in some of your comments when you're talking about C's and I's. I had to learn to write my emails twice. I would write it once with my bullet point style, and then I would add, "How are you today?" And I hope everything's going well. And depending on who my audience
You know,
was.
I do that myself, Mark, and it's funny because, I'm an ID style on the disc model and very pronounced, high strongly inclined ID style, and what I find for that is some of that varies on what's my stress level at the given moment and
Hmm.
what's on my mind. So sometimes I start out more relational and, "Hey, how you doing? Oh, let's talk about this." Other times I get right down to business. Boom,
Yep.
boom, boom, let's go. So
Yeah.
I have to think about then again from that interpersonal and relationship management. Who am I writing to? What's the context of what I'm writing? What's going to work best for them for where I start? Not just what's in here, but what's
Yeah.
out there, and that's a big part of leaders, going back to leaders focusing on their people. So much of it is you have to learn that self-management side. It's not about just meeting your needs, but it's about paying attention to the team and meeting their needs, or paying attention to the client, whoever the other person is, and shifting and adapting to meet them where they are.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I don't know exactly of who your target client is, but my assumption is that you work with leaders at all levels. If you start to see, maybe not, it has nothing to do with age, but first time leaders or people moving into a leadership role for the first time, what are some of the challenges that you see from a communication, from a personality, from a whatever style that they need to really focus on? So maybe it's even my question is probably even a, what type of guidance would you provide a first time leader as they start to move into that role?
Mm, great question. Yeah, some of that's going to vary on what's their background and, frankly, their age and maturity level when they're first moving into that role. But as a general rule, when someone's first moving into more of a leadership role, we have to help them shift that mindset from like individual contributor
Mhm.
to team leader, or to leader of a project, leader of a group of people working towards some end, right? And so that shifting is really, it starts with, okay, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the team. It's about the end goal that you're all working towards together. And so, helping them get out of that mindset of what's like, for, just simple things like, what's most important for me today isn't my typical check off the box to dos that are individual tasks, but instead they're going to be things like, what's most important for me to do today is check in with the team members, see what support they need. Have I provided the resources? How can I clear barriers for them? So it's shifting that mindset from, what does success look like and how do you get there? It's not about you performing
Yeah,
individually, but it's about creating that system, creating that ecosystem and environment for your team to perform.
I love it. I love it. All right, we're getting close to time, so I want to ask one last question of you. If you think back to 21-year-old Sharon, what is one thing that you wish she knew that you've learned over the years?
Oh, that is such an excellent question. So, gosh, for 21-year-old Sharon, I was still in college, so, yeah, so not quite done with school. I'd say the probably the one thing I wish she really got was that life is a do-it-yourself game, and but it with other players, right? So, it meaning, like, you're not locked into any one decision you make at that point, you're not locked into any one action. You do want to be intentional and thoughtful about where you're going. The sooner you get to know yourself and your true strengths, the easier life will become and the more fun life will become.
Mhm.
So, you'll be swimming with the stream instead of swimming up against the stream. The sooner you get to know yourself, and again, what, who you are, how you're made up, what your personal mission and purpose is in life. Um, yeah, I could go on and on, but those are the
Yeah.
those are the first things that come to mind when I ask.
No, I love that. And I think the one thing I would add to that too is, yes, the quicker you figure out who you are, the better. But at the same time, you've got to be flexible enough to know that you're going to continue to grow and become a different person at 21 and 31 and 41 and 51. And that's good.
Absolutely agree with that, Mark. Yeah, I think that would be the other part is when I was saying, like, don't get stuck on any one decision or action you
Yeah.
take. Know that you're gonna keep learning and growing and making it up as you go, and you can make this big, beautiful life anything you want it to be, right? So, don't get stuck, basically.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck.
I love it. Sharon, this has been so fun. Would you talk about what would a typical engagement look like with you and your firm, and how can people get a hold of you?
Great question. Thank you for that, Mark. So the typical engagement, really, we do kind of range on that. At the simplest level, like, we are providers of everything DISC 5 behaviors and PXT select assessments. So we support companies using those internally. So we might simply be setting them up with an administrative account, training them on that, and supplying the tools they need to keep using them ongoing, helping them get certified, or trained to use those tools. That might be it. On the more complex end, it might be a longer term leadership development and coaching engagement um, with me or a couple of my team members, where we're going to be really digging in, co-creating, collaborating with that client, being their partners in hand for a couple of years as we work on developing their leaders internal to the organization. And there's a range of stuff in between. The simplest way to get a hold of us, our website is developpeople.com. Our sister online store is disklearningsolutions.com. Our contact information's out there. I'm Sharon at developpeople.com. So reach out and let's begin the conversation to figure out what you need and how we can serve you.
I love it. Sharon, this has been a blast. Thank you for hanging out with me.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. All right, y'all. We have done it another time. We found another amazing leader with great insights to share as you continue along that journey to CEO-ship. As a reminder, Igniting the CEO Within is sponsored by Quaid, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Quaid has created Launchpad, which provides an opportunity for experienced executive coaches and strategic advisors to become licensed circle directors and significantly impact the lives of CEOs and entrepreneurs. To find out more, visit quaidcircle.com. Until next time, keep igniting that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge. Thanks for listening.